On this episode of Cinema Disaster, we're going to be talking about the 1985 vampire film Fright Night. This movie was written and directed by Tom Holland, who also went on to write and direct Child's Play. He also wrote Psycho 3, as well as Class of 1984. There was a really cool movie that came out when I was a kid called Cloak and Dagger, which Tom Holland also wrote. And it's like a spy movie for kids. I guess it's kind of like a kid's spy movie, but it's kind of dark and kind of scary. At least for me, it was kind of disturbing as a kid, but it's a really cool movie nonetheless. It was during the writing of that film that he got the idea for Fright Night, but it would take him, I think he said, like a year of trying to piece it together in his head on how he could actually make it work. Because this movie, in the plot, it's almost like, I would say, suburban horror, because it takes place in the suburbs, and we have this high school kid who is played by William Ragsdale, who was on the show Herman's Head. He plays a character by the name of Charlie. Initially, this part was thought to be, was offered out to, I guess, several different people. William Ragsdale had auditioned for the movie Mask with Cher and Eric Stoltz, and the part of Rocky Dennis went to Eric Stoltz rather than William Ragsdale. But the casting director, Jackie Birch did casting on so many 80s movies that I grew up on. It's absolutely insane. But Jackie Birch was so impressed by his audition for Mask that, Ragsdale ended up getting the role in this film. So we have Charlie that is living in the suburbs. He has a girlfriend named Amy, who is played by Amanda Bierce. You probably know as Marcy Darcy from Married with Children. She was also in the movie Fraternity Vacation, as well as The Doom Generation. She plays Charlie's girlfriend, which leads me to another character named Evil, or sometimes referred to in the film as Evil Ed, which is Charlie's best friend. And he is played by Stephen Jeffries, who I would say most of you know from maybe 976 Evil. He was also in Fraternity Vacation with Amanda Bierce. He was in this really great movie that I saw, I think at the beginning of the year, called Heaven Help Us. I highly recommend that film. That was one that sort of slipped by me in the 80s. I'd heard of it, I'd never seen it. But you find Heaven Help Us and you watch it, and I guarantee you will not be disappointed. But anyway, Stephen Jeffries was not a fan of horror movies at the time, so he initially had auditioned for the role of Gary in Weird Science, which he lost out to Anthony Michael Hall. But once again, Jackie Birch was impressed by his performance and offered him the role as Evil Ed in this film. Then you have Chris Sarandon, who you probably know as the voice of Jack Skellington from Nightmare Before Christmas. He was also in Tales from the Crypt, Bordello of Blood. And he also did Child's Play with Tom Holland again. Chris Sarandon also someone who was early on in his career, and he didn't want to do a horror film. He said he can't do a horror film because he was afraid of being typecast as the villain. Because, he also played in the movie The Princess Bride as the villain. And it's strange that these people say that, Chris Sarandon and Stephen Jeffries say, "Oh, I'm not a fan of horror," but yet they go on to do, like, Sarandon goes on to do Child's Play, Bordello of Blood, and he's A Nightmare Before Christmas. And then you got Stephen Jeffries going on to do 976 Evil. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess they changed their tune after a while. Well, anyway, this movie also stars veteran actor Roddy McDowall, who plays a horror host by the name of Peter Vincent, who does a show, it's like a local public access, that's the word I'm looking for, a public access show called Fright Night, where he plays Peter Vincent, the vampire hunter. The name Peter Vincent is a combination of Peter Cushing and Vincent Price. Roddy McDowall, you probably know as Cornelius from the original Planet of the Apes. He was also in Class of 1984, The Black Hole. He was in, what else? Bedknobs and Broomsticks, The Poseidon Adventure. I mean, his list goes on and on and on and on. Well, anyway, so what happens is Jerry Dandridge, who is Chris Sarandon's character in this film, the vampire, he ends up moving next door to Charlie. And Charlie witnesses all sorts of strange things happening throughout the film. He's always spying on Jerry with a pair of binoculars. He sees, like, coffins going into his house, and one night he witnesses him murdering a woman. He sees that he has fangs, and he catches on that he's a vampire. And so this movie has this very, like I said, suburban horror. Can you really trust the neighbor next door? Do you really know who your neighbor is? And I know, so there's a paranoia. There's a lot of paranoia, feeling of paranoia in this movie. And there's been other films that have used that sort of, what do you want to call it? Like the sort of, like the neighbor next door kind of thing. I know the movie Disturbia has done that in more recent times. But this is a film that one of the things that I really like about this film, for one thing, it follows one of the classic horror tropes, is that, of course, he knows that Dandridge is a vampire. So he tells everybody. He tells his mom, he tells his friends, his girlfriend, and of course, nobody believes him. That happens in every horror film. So if I ever come to any of you and I tell you there's a vampire living next door to me, you better fucking believe me. Don't put my life at risk for your disbelief. But one thing I really like about this movie is the whole horror host factor. Because one of the things that influenced me to do this show was a lot of the old public access shows that I saw growing up, as well as James Rolfe, I know as the Andrew Video Game Nerd, his Monster Madness series, as well as his video rental reviews, is a huge influence on what I do, as well as USA Up All Night, back when Gilbert Gottfried used to host, obviously Monster Vision with Joe Bob Biggs. Those are all things that very much influenced me to do what I do on this show. Not as good, obviously, but as best I can. And you can't be what your idols are, right? That's what they say. But anyway, I'm off subject. So since nobody believes Jerry nobody believes Charlie in this, who does he go to? He goes to Peter Vincent, the vampire killer, because he plays a vampire killer on his public access show Fright Night. So Charlie believes that he would know what to do. But in real life, obviously he's just playing a part. He's not a vampire killer. And of course, Peter Vincent thinks he's crazy also, thinks he needs mental help. One of the interesting things about this is that it was Roddy McDowall's choice to play Peter Vincent. As he said, his influence was Burt Laird's portrayal of the Cowardly Lion in the original Wizard of Oz, as being on TV. He plays somebody very strong and very not easily frightened. Someone who, he goes around and he kills vampires, but in real life he's very cowardly and very timid, and he's afraid of everything. So that gave that character an interesting dynamic. Another thing about Chris Sarandon's performance is he felt that it was a very deep character, and he felt that the character was very dark, and he wanted to lighten him up a bit. So he ended up making Jerry Dandridge a little bit more witty, a little bit more cynical. It was also his idea to eat fruit throughout the whole movie, because fruit bats, if he's a bat, then he should be eating fruit. So I remember a scene, the very first time I ever caught wind of this film, I guess, was probably on the VHS shelves when we went to rent movies as a kid. And this is one of those I talked about in my VHS retrospective. This is one of those movie posters that really, really captured my attention. I mean, look at this. This is what I saw on the movie shelf. And you can see you have the vampire's face in the clouds hovering over the house, and just that whole dark tone of it, and the blue coloring in the clouds just gave it this once again a very mesmerizing but scary to a kid. It's very one of those things that I was scared of, but I could not look away. Then one night, we used to have all the HBO, Cinemax, Showtime when I was growing up. My parents did. I remember turning it on one night, and it was the scene in Fright Night where Evil is sitting on the ground in an alley, and it's this very creepy alley, and he's crying, and he's talking about, he's kind of panicking. He talks about how he got bit by this vampire, and William Ragsdale's character and Amanda Bierce's character is there, and it was very scary, and I quickly changed the channel. And little did I know that, if I would have kept it on just a few seconds longer, I would have realized that he was lying to them, and he was just fucking around. He didn't get bit at all. So, but there's a lot of very cool elements in this film. So if you like suburban horror, if you like vampire movies, especially 80s vampire films, and also, if you like any of the actors in this movie, definitely check it out. They made a sequel to this, which, Fright Night 2, Tom Holland was busy with Child's Play, and so was Chris Sarandon, so they could not return. Amanda Bierce was busy with Married with Children. Another thing, and so she couldn't return either. Stephen Jeffries was doing 976 Evil. So the only people that came back was William Ragsdale and Roddy McDowall. And to direct, they got Tommy Lee Wallace, who was the writer and director for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is an awesome Halloween movie. I know there's a lot of haters out there, but that's a great film. It's like one big, long Twilight Zone episode. So, that's a complete another subject. Actually, I did a video on Halloween 3, so just watch that. Then there was a proposal to do Halloween 3, or not Halloween 3, now my mind's thinking in another direction. A proposal to do a Fright Night 3, which never came to be. It got canceled. There was a Bollywood remake of this film in 1989. And then in 2011, you had the remake of Fright Night that I'm sure most of you remember, especially a lot of the younger viewers. Maybe that was your introduction to Fright Night. They had a comic book series from 88 to 93. There was a computer game where you actually got to play as Jerry Dandridge, and you had to go around and turn your victims into vampires. I never got to play that game, but looking back on it now, it sounds like it might have been pretty cool. There's a documentary in the works now. It may be out already, but it's called "Oh, You're So Cool, Brewster," and it's the story of Fright Night. And that's I'm very excited about that, and I cannot wait. Can't wait to see that. So, you know, you like 80s movies, you like vampires, you like movies that has, you know, paranoia, elements of humor, lots of elements of darkness, and Roddy McDowall. You can't really go wrong. So until next time, check out Fright Night and keep watching.